You're watching the 5 Minute Bark Podcast on YouTube. If you like this episode, you just may like many more. Subscribe today by clicking the red subscribe button in the top right-hand corner. Okay, so we're live on the 5 Minute Bark Podcast today with a special guest, longtime friend, BMX pro Eddie Fiola here today. It's going to be really exciting because we had the opportunity to have a chance to really enjoy being professional BMX stunt riders and travel the world. Very few people got the ability to go and hang out in several countries around the world, and both Eddie and I have not only had the privilege of doing that, but we've even had a chance to do it ourselves together. So I'm so glad to meet up with him after many, many years, 30 plus years of probably being apart almost. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time. So we have Eddie Fiola here, otherwise known as GT World Class Pro Freestyle Rider, on the show here today. So hello, Eddie. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good too.
Hey, you know it's your birthday today.
It is my birthday, and I'm so excited to be here today. And we tried to record this earlier out in the sun, and that just didn't work.
Yeah, it got a little hot, and the equipment got a little sketchy, but hey, we're doing it again.
We are.
And we're going to make it work. So
actually, we want to talk about a few things here today. We kind of both been reflecting on the before and after of the sport of freestyle. And Eddie's been lucky enough to be patient and put a lot of time into creating a new bike that he's coming out with. And we're going to talk about that a little bit too here today. You know, we're always talking about what's the perfect bike and all the different things that a bike should have. And he's really put some time into this, many years in time into the new bike that he wants to come out with. So we're going to talk about that a little bit too here today. So if you have not heard of who Eddie Fiola is, we are BMX freestyle bike riders. We've both did basically stunts on a bike, and essentially Eddie was one of the classics, or one of the people that actually originated and started learning the first tricks that even existed. So I guess they call it old school. And anything? Yeah, go ahead.
What's funny is that you say we're called old school, and I like to put my little twist on things, and they say I'm not old school. I'm preschool, right? I'm not old school because there wasn't a school before us.
True. We
had to make it. We were the elementary of the school. So I'm going to say more of the Matt Hoffmans and the people that came after us are old school. We're preschool. There was nobody before us. I tell people that we're part of the A games, not the X games. We're way before that.
Yeah.
So the awesome games and not the X games. So it's just we had fun doing it, but literally we didn't have anybody before us, and we had to figure it out.
What's the first major competition that you competed in that actually had magazines and maybe video, if it even existed back then, right? AFA, I believe, right?
Well, it was the AFA competition. One of the major competitions was at, I think it was Skate City. It was in Whittier, California, and the magazines were both there. And what was funny is that what started this whole competition thing off is that they had a picture of, let's say, Jeff Watson. Jeff Watson was a skate park rider, and he rode in at Pipeline and got some big airs. The magazine had then come out and taken a picture of me, and then they put in the caption, well, who's better, Watson or Fiola? So this is what pretty much sparked the whole competition for the AFA, and then Bob Morales made the AFA, and we all competed. So
did you know Bob before AFA even existed?
Yeah, Bob and I literally didn't have my driver's license till I was 18. I didn't need a driver's license. I was at school. From after school, I'd be riding my bike, and after that, I just didn't need it. So, and then when Bob came around, he was my ride that helped me get to other skate parks. So
he literally would drive you. So he was like almost your chaperone.
Yeah, he was the chaperone, but he was just a good friend, and he was the entrepreneur. He was selling stickers, and you know, having these ideas of competition and calling it the ASPA or the Skate Park Association, or now the AFA, which is you know, what it is today.
So you started out essentially as a skate park rider before even like ramps, wooden ramps existed.
Right. Well, prior to us riding skate parks, the skateboard industry was actually going downhill, and a lot of the skateboard parks were closing down. So when we asked the skate parks if we could ride, they were denying us. And as the skateboarding was dying out, they said, well, if you're going to pay to ride, come on in. So literally me and about 10 other friends that went to the same school, we all came in and rode, and every single day we'd be paying, our $3 to ride for the whole day. So
when was the first time you actually, like, I've been upland.
yeah.
Like, that's a steep wall. It's like 4 feet of vert plus, 12 feet at least deep, I believe. What was the first time you felt like just getting out of the top of that thing?
Well, okay, so we tried, as BMX riders, we tried to emulate the skateboarding, but we knew that our speed was a little bit faster. We had brakes. We tried different things. The aerial back then for a skateboarder was, 2-3 feet out. So that's what we tried, is 2-3 feet out. Well, we actually got a little bit higher than 2 or 3. And then eventually when we got to Pipeline, we were doing bigger airs, but that park was huge. It was really steep. And then the combi pool actually had coping, which was something that we weren't used to. And hitting coping on a 4-foot vertical wall, something different about that. And it's just a different style of riding, and you just make it work.
Yeah. Because obviously the video I saw, you guys weren't having a problem with it. It didn't kick you out to the bottom. You were really getting really smooth and really high, really early on too.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, AFA started being ramps at a location, not at a skate park, like say a 6-foot or 8-foot ramp, quarter pipe. So you guys actually had to work backwards, because you had to go to the taller ramps, skate parks,
right,
to the smaller ramps. And vice versa for me. I started on a 6-foot quarter pipe and thinking that's massively huge, going to an 8-foot quarter pipe. And then finally I got a chance to go to upland, and I was like, this is just unbelievable. So I had to work it kind of backwards. You had to work it reverse.
Yeah. So, so in that realm of things, it just made it feel a lot easier to me, because I was going to a smaller ramp. It was like a kick turn ramp compared to Pipeline or Upland or Del Mar or places like that. And where I grew up in Lakewood was just the half pipe that I rode was literally and truly a half pipe. There was no flat bottom. It was linear to where you had to ride. As you rolled in, you were turning left. As you did your first air, you did a right turn. And as your next air, you're going to do a left. So you literally had to turn both ways and learn airs on both sides.
I never learned that barely. Like I could go like 2 feet on the reverse side and then, 10 feet on the other eventually. But one thing that just kind of came to mind is like, okay, so we're just kids, we're riding bikes, we're emulating skateboarders, we're riding in skate parks. Now we're trying to do some things on some ramps. Then it kind of became like legit. Like sponsors started to come into the picture. People are kind of watching, checking things out. It's kind of really became a sport.
Right. So
how'd that like resonate with, like, did it like, it just didn't even think about it?
It happened so fast. So what was weird is that I was at a skate park, and I had someone ask me if I would like to do shows. And I go, I don't understand. What do you mean by shows? And they said, well, this lady, this Gail Webb lady, has skateboarders and roller skaters and a bicycle rider in her shows. I'm going, on like what? They go, well, she has this plexiglass half pipe, and she would want you to ride this plexiglass half pipe in her shows. Okay. And the deal is what? We'll pay you. You're going to pay me to go have fun on your ramp. Oh yeah. And we're going to pay for your food. Wait, you're going to feed me, pay me, and I get to ride your ramp? That's a no-brainer. I'm there all day, whatever you need. So riding this half pipe, and that was weird, is that starting with Gail Webb, doing these shows with Fred Blood, and Freddie DeSoto as a skateboarder, Mike Smith as a skateboarder, Tony Hawk as a skateboarder, all doing her shows in this half pipe, and it was awesome. And then as this show went around the United States, I eventually got hooked up with a sponsorship after the magazine came out, and it just kind of whirlwind through there. It happened one right after another, and not being a kid, not knowing, let's say, contracts and things like that, you pretty much sign your life away. But best time of my life.
I didn't even know that she was one of the original show.
Oh yeah,
creators.
So before anybody else, Gail Webb was doing shows, and it's funny is that, you know, even in some of this new school information technology thing, they forget about her. And she was literally one of the first people out there to have. There were other half pipe shows, but there weren't half pipe shows with all extreme sports.
And to continue that, she's still going.
Still going.
So she's the last, because a lot of the teams have melted away.
Right. And a lot of the teams are, you know, they stick to strictly either bike shows or skateboard shows. There's not a whole lot of all extreme. Like, I think Gail still uses scooter riders and rollerbladers and skateboarders and BMX riders all at one show.
So eventually there was like a decision to make a freestyle bike, like a bike made for doing tricks. Now, you were part of that. You eventually got signed on with GT. Was one of your first GTs? Were you sponsored by GT before they had a freestyle bike or after?
I was sponsored by GT before they had a freestyle bike. I was literally sponsored by Kuwahara first, through Bob Morales. Bob Morales was doing stickers at the time. Bob Morales introduced me and himself to Howie Cohen, which was Everything Bicycles, and he owned Kuwahara Bicycles. That was the very first one of the skate park competitions that I entered, riding a Kuwahara.
And that was a great bike, by the way. I always respected the Kuwahara bike.
Yeah.
It was just always well put together. The colors were great. The stickers were great.
Right. So on that, we now are talking to GT, and we said we would like to ride a GT because, anyhow, we parted from Kuwahara and we went to GT, and GT at that time didn't have a freestyle bike, but at this time we were also starting to do different tricks where we needed to do different things on the bike, and I knew that I wanted to spin my handlebars around, and by doing that, the brakes weren't passing through the race frame. I had mentioned to Gary that on the red line, it had a little notch, a brace that made that flat area, and then it came straight down. It didn't have a bend in it, but Gary had mentioned, he said, well, that bend's not going to work. It's the bike's going to break right there. It's going to have a kink, and it's not going to work. I'm going, I rode a Schwinn Stingray for years before I had a freestyle bike or a BMX bike, and I never broke anything in this bend area. He says, hey, we'll make it. We'll try it out. We'll see if it works. You get to ride it.
So that's essentially the first change to a racing bike.
Correct.
To accommodate a brake.
Correct. So there was, my influence was the bend on the head tube area. Bob Morales's addition to the Performer was the standing platform, because he rode a Torker. Torker had race bikes, double top tube, but he did freestyle on it. To make a freestyle bike the way we needed it, Bob put the double top tube standing platform, and we put in the bent head tube angle. Made a Performer.
And then Haro came along and kind of put...
So they put everything together and put the double top tube, and then they brought the bottom tube to the top and put in that extra brace, which would let you spin the bars around with the MX-1000 brakes, right?
See, I didn't even know all this. This is really interesting. That's why the bend was there. I just thought it was just kind of looks.
Yeah. So it was there for a purpose. And then I had literally mentioned this to Steve Potts.
We have dogs on the set.
Yeah, yeah. We have people coming in and checking out the whole podcast, and it's kind of cool.
So okay, so
I don't see any blood on those shins.
So we have the bend because
Yeah.
of brakes, and Haro comes along and starts making theirs. So officially, GT said, "Let's make this thing and produce it and go forward with it."
Yeah. Now we start making it. It is a race bike, and we just made these little changes to it and made it work to where the bend was not inhibiting the spinning of the bars. But what we had to add was this, and I had mentioned it to Steve Potts. I said, somehow, some way, I don't know if anybody can do this or not, but maybe drill a hole through this bolt, which became a Potts mod. Somebody else, I had an idea. I said it to somebody else. They made it, and it's a Potts mod. It works great. And then we had to figure out how to do something with the back brakes, but that's a little ways down.
So now we have a freestyle bike.
Yeah, right. So from a race bike, we didn't know any difference. We took the race bike and we did a couple bends. We added on the platform and we started doing freestyle exactly the way we were doing it on the race bike. But we had these extra modifications. We were able to spin the handlebars around. We were able to stand on the top tube. We're doing more tricks. And GT was loving it. And BMX racing wasn't exactly on top at this point in time. It was doing well, but now we've made a freestyle frame.
New market.
And you can go out in front of your house and do freestyle. You didn't have to go to a BMX track. You didn't have to go drive for hours in order to get somewhere. It would just take time to go out in front yard and practice and have fun. So anybody could do it. So I think that this helped out GT and other bicycle manufacturers to stay alive in the industry.
Totally. So now it's the time to like actually be sponsored in the way of getting paid to ride a bike. And you had to negotiate a contract. You're what, 18 years old, 16? I don't know. How old were you?
Yeah, 18, 19 years old. Well, so right out of high school.
How'd that feel? I mean, like now this is kind of surreal, right?
Yeah. What was funny is that at 18, I was already getting paid to ride my bike.
For shows.
For shows. And paid well. And small sponsorships, through Kuhara was one of them, and then we had Max Leathers, and then Premier Helmets, and all these other smaller companies added up to quite a bit of money. And what was funny is that I was actually making more money than some of the teachers at my school. So
that's pretty
finishing
cool.
School wasn't one of my priorities. I would suggest finishing school though, because now that I have money, I don't know what to do with it, but my wife does. So it's just, if I could go back and relearn school ethics, I think it would be a different way of me utilizing what I know now. So
you essentially didn't graduate from school, or you did?
Oh, I graduated.
So you're just like me, you just kind of did it, but just kind of blew through it.
Barely made it, but I made it. I got
here.
my certificate and I got everything. But, so now I'm sponsored. I'm making money. I'm riding a bike. I'm sponsored by one of the major BMX companies out there, GT, and through GT at one time only made frame, fork, and handlebars, right? So we would get other sponsors for like tires or rims or pad sets or leathers or helmets and gloves and grips, and if you add all of these things up, all I have to do is ride my bike.
Yeah. And that's awesome. So now you're making money, you're getting paid, doing what you love to do. And then now GT's growing this brand.
Right.
Nationally, internationally, slowly taking on South America, the Asias, the Europe.
And the other thing about GT was smart enough to use the riders and promote the riders as riders and not just the bike. They made superheroes. They made us into an
mainly you.
Well, they did it with a lot of the guys. They did it with Martin. They did it with Josh White. And other companies like Skyway, you know, used Scotty Freeman and Hugo Gonzalez and people like that. And Redline used RL and they just made us into superheroes of BMX. So
I noticed they never put an actual bike out there with your name, like the Eddie Fiola model or something like that. They never.
So
did that ever come up?
They did. They made a bike. It was a World Tour Eddie Fiola model, right? It's a World Tour one. It only lasted for about 6 months, and it got written off, and they just.
It was expensive.
Well, it wasn't just it was an expensive. It was all the top of the line parts that I used. So that was what they tried to sell to everybody else. So if they don't have, I don't know, I rode right out of the box anyhow, right? They gave me a bike. It was in a box. That's the one I'd ride.
You didn't care.
No.
And that bikes were rideable right out of the box. They were really good bikes.
Yeah. So I mean, all the parts, all the brakes and everything that they had, literally straight out of the box, we could ride it.
Yeah. So now the sport has teaching us a lot. I started to meet you now at this point. I started to come up from the East Coast, and all these riders around, thousands of people from around the world are into this new sport that was initially started simply with kids riding in skateboard parks and after dinner going out and just banging around with a curb. And now it's like this big business, and you're traveling around, and you and I got the opportunity to go to France and ride out there. And we're riding in, you know, high caliber situations where fancy dinners were happening around us, and they made ramps custom for our events. And
I mean, so actually traveling to, where was it? Bercy.
Yeah.
And it was in their arena where it was indoors, where they normally held a velodrome race. Literally a 6-day race that they rode 10 speeds well, I should say 1 speeds in this circle. And they did this for an amount of time that they would actually let us ride our BMX bikes and set up half pipes. And they had a dinner there. It was incredible. And the way they treated us was above and beyond the Call of Duty. It was great. We got, not only did we, get to ride our bicycles in this place that we normally wouldn't have, but they took us on a motorcycle trip. They took us on a helicopter ride, and they did so much stuff for us then, which I wouldn't change a thing.
It wouldn't. It was really amazing, and to experience this, but we all learned so much from being professional BMX freestyle bike riders. Not only did we learn how to do tricks and be consistent and hardworking, we had to learn how to market, so to speak. I remember just understanding marketing because we were a marketing tool. Sure.
So, and that's what helped us, or helped me figure out how I can make money doing what I love to do. So if you took a magazine, and let's say somebody had to put an ad in this magazine, and this full page color ad would cost you $3,000. If I got in the magazine twice and they only paid me $2,000, well, then they got an extra ad out of their thing for half the price. So by utilizing this analogy, this whatever you want to call it, you could, put a price tag on your head, like I'm worth this much because I'm going to be in the magazine this many times, or if I win a competition, I'm going to be in the magazine this time. And there's not only one magazine, there's 5 or 6 different magazines, and everybody was going to be at this competition, all taking photos of all of us riding. So
yeah, it was like a mecca, right? Yeah. It was just action everywhere, clothing companies, bikes, sneaker companies, everything. Yeah. So now we're older. The sport's changed a ton, and there's like the now and then. And you and I had talked about, we feel, that's just our own opinion, we feel it was a little more of a professional sport before.
So if I go back then, if I think about back then, literally 5 skate parks in the whole United States, and they're in Southern California. There's about 7 different magazines, Southern California. The opportunity of me getting in the magazines, pretty good. Now, me asking for money to be in the or not being in the magazines, but because I'm in the magazines, I could put a price tag on what I'm worth. Now we're going to fast forward to today. Now, how many skate parks are there from here to Arizona?
Hundreds.
Thousands.
Thousands? Wow.
Thousands, right? Because there's one in every little city.
That's true.
There's a guy at each one of those parks. There's one guy, if not 2 or 3, but I guarantee there's one guy that rips at every single one of those parks. One guy. Okay, so now you got a skate park in your own hometown, and you rip at it. How many magazines are there?
I don't think there is any, is there?
There isn't any.
There's
right?
still none.
None. There's no physical magazines on BMX anymore. There's the magazines you see online.
Not even racing either.
No, there's nothing. So, going back to when we were in the magazines, people would take those magazines and look through them and read them and take out the pictures and place them on their wall, right?
I did. Oh, yeah.
And I did too. I mean, I had Harry Leary, I had Stu Thompson, I had,
Greg Hill.
Toby Henderson and Greg Hill and all these guys that had the style, and I'd stick them on my wall, and every day that I'd go in my room and just think about, oh, that's a cool style, and oh, that's a good looking trick, and I want to emulate that in the skate park, or maybe do that somewhere else in some time. But kids don't have that today, and when you look at the pictures, you're fully sponsored and the sponsorships and they just looked professional, right? So where you look at photos today and guys are riding with black t-shirt and skinny jeans and no brakes, and I couldn't tell you who they were sponsored by because most of the bikes don't have any stickers. They don't have any stickers on them. They're not recognizable by a different look to where if you had a GT and a Hutch side by side, you
can't tell a difference.
A half a mile away, you'd be able to tell a difference.
Nowadays, yeah. I mean, back then, sorry.
Yeah, you couldn't tell a bike apart today unless you were totally up close or you knew the manufacturing company, and it's really hard. So to see somebody now that rips and tears it up, giving away the effort that they're doing, it's hard to see.
So if you were to give some advice to somebody nowadays who maybe wanted to understand and take advantage of your advice, you probably would quadruple the amount of money everybody else is making, what should they do?
I would look at the aspect of sponsorships, of what the sponsor is looking for. So let's say Oakley wants to sponsor you. Well, wouldn't you want to wear an Oakley shirt or an Oakley jersey or have Oakley pants on or an Oakley hat or stickers all over your helmet that said Oakley on it? That way Oakley would pay you, right? Otherwise, nobody knows who you're sponsored by or who you're, what you're wearing or what you're doing. So, I don't want to call it a sellout, but if you want to ride your bike for the rest of your life, or you want to do something for the rest of your life that you have fun doing, you got to work at it, and you got to go out there and get somebody else to pay for it.
Yeah. And you're right. There's no stickers on the bikes, and they're purposely hidden. The colors are, very simple. I know that chrome is really difficult to do nowadays because of standards.
Yeah.
I remember we used to have the chrome bikes, which was pretty cool. You even notice that they don't really clean the bikes either. I mean, it's pretty amazing. But we used to, spend hours cleaning our bikes and polishing them and making sure that they're clean and professional.
The thing is that when we were riding as professional kids riding our bikes, GT knew this, and GT didn't want me to be riding a bike that had all scratched up and the stickers all scraped up and things like that. So they would literally hand me a new bike before any competition, before any show. So I had so many bikes, and I had given away so many bikes because if it had a scratch on it, GT didn't want me to use it. So my neighbor had a bike. Yep. My cousins had a bike. Everybody had a bike on my street from GT. It's scratched up and scraped, but
barely.
Yeah.
Barely. I know I used to get a bike a month. Automatically, it just came in the mail, shipped, boom, done. And, you know, like you said, we really were particular about having a nice bike. And in fact, not only did I get a bike a month, but sometimes even halfway through the month, I'd bend a fork or something like that. So they'd be FedExing me new bike, shoes, you know.
Without a question.
Forks, yeah.
Yeah.
And we had to have the bikes dialed in, and we had the uniforms. We had pre-show uniforms, and our trailers and stuff like that were top notch and professional with the graphics, and it was something to be proud of. It really was something to be proud of, and be a part of. And now, again, 30 years later, because you were a franchise tag, you were with GT essentially your entire career. You can Google GT and you come up. Right.
So, which is funny is that, you know, I decided to make a bike, and, you know, years after riding for GT no longer makes a performer look bike.
They just make a bike. I don't even know if it's called a freestyle bike anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a freestyle bike.
But they no longer make that bike in any way, shape, or form. They make a lot of dirt jumping bikes and here and there. And I wanted to bring that nostalgia back. I wanted to make it look old, but ride new. So I took a bike that I was riding anyhow from a company called Supercross. And I designed a freestyle bike off of that. I pretty much made it look like a performer, but I called it a proformer because I'm a former pro, right? So it all works out. Instead of using GT, I used the EF. And hey, Eddie Fiola works proformer, former pro, pretty close. But anyhow, I made this bike, made it was supposed to be 250, made 235. And that's where we're at right now. And we'll see if we're going to come up with anything new.
You liking it? Are you really enjoying making these bikes?
No, not at all. I hate making bikes. I don't want to be a bicycle manufacturer, but because I love riding and being able to ride my own bike, it just makes me feel good. So the demand
is there, obviously.
I never knew what all the bicycle manufacturers had to go through as being their own business. You know, when I do stunts, somebody says, hey, I need you to hit the ground here and fall over and roll into this camera area. Right then and there, I can do it.
Yep.
But when somebody says, hey, I'll get you that part in 2 weeks, and it doesn't show up for 6 months. Well, wait, I just gave my 2 weeks notice to everybody out there, and now it's 6 months.
That's business.
That's business, unfortunately.
And so you're learning business, and that's good.
Yeah.
It's a new chapter of your life is learning business, and you'll figure it out, and you are, because you have an amazing bike. We just rode them today out in the yard here, and it's just really great to spend some time with you here today.
Very cool.
Learned about freestyle, learned about how the GT even came to be.
Yeah.
And where you're at now is still amazing. And to see that your legacy is still there, people are still inviting you all around the world. Just came back from Australia.
Yep.
You said you're going to England.
Going back to Australia, getting ready to do some stunt work out in Atlanta, Georgia. Still doing riding at Huntington Beach on every other Tuesday. Martin's there every Tuesday, but because I live in Temecula area, I go every other Tuesday. Now, I don't know when this podcast will be shooting or airing.
Next week.
Next week. All right. So you guys will all miss the big show that we're doing at the pole position for Gail Webb. We're just showing up. We're all racing karts. And Jeremy McGrath will be there. Ricky Johnson will be there. Jeff Emig will be there. All these big motocross guys. Steve Caballero will be there as a skateboarder. Myself, Martin, and we're all just getting into these go-karts and we're racing everybody. And anybody that buys a race, that money goes to the Gail Webb Kids Are Number One Foundation. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
your life's been all about fun.
It's fun, it's work, but it's, and I think that's what makes my life simple is that I really don't stress over a whole lot of stuff because it's just, it's not necessary.
No, it really isn't. If you're just enjoying what you're doing, you make a little money here and there and living a good life, and that's all that matters, right?
Yeah.
And having fun. Probably a lot of last questions before we end here. Probably a lot of listeners out there that follow BMX would. Who's probably the most that you hang out with or keep in contact with, and out of all the people that ride today?
I'm going to say it's Martin Aparijo, right? So Martin and I have known each other for many, many years, and we still ride together and we have fun. And if there's an opportunity of me doing something, I try to get Martin involved with it. And I know that's vice versa also. And then, I see Mike Dominguez every once in a while. I see Brian Blyther and Xavier Mendez, and we all hang out and we have fun. And every year at Woodward, we're all able to come and hang out and have fun and just ride and tell our stories that what we've been doing and about our kids and our families that we, it's a big family reunion as we get together. So
is that happening again this year?
It just came around. They just had it. And what was funny is that I had to work. I just got a last minute phone call. I had to work out in Mexico. And Xavier says, dude, no, you have to come to Woodward. I go, but I'm working. He says, I don't care. You have to come to Woodward after work or I'm like, cause I'm supposed to work Thursday, Friday, and then I'm off Saturday, Sunday, and I got to go work back on Monday. And Xavier says, as long as you make it back here on Saturday, we're good. I said, okay, whatever.
So you did make it.
So I did make it.
Oh, good.
Well, funny thing is that when I made it there, everybody had a shirt on from Woodward that when you pay for your entry, you got a free t-shirt, which they do every year. But this t-shirt had my picture on it.
Wow.
So I was the honorable honoree that year that they never told me about.
Oh, so it was a surprise.
Surprise.
Good surprise.
Good thing I made it there.
Just like this show today is a good surprise for me.
Yeah.
I'm really stoked to have Eddie Fiola here today. Professional freestyle we all looked up to and continue to look up to and continue to look at and watch. He's always playful, never had a job in his life, entrepreneur forever, for sure. And still riding his bike. If you're wondering, he's still, I just saw him ride. He's still just as smooth as ever. And has a great family and lives here in Southern California. And, he's got a bike coming out soon. So it's already out with the first round, but he's coming out with a new round that's supposed to be bigger and better geometry. I just rode it. It's really nice. It's really rides nice. And I haven't been on a bike in some time, but it just didn't feel clunky. It felt like a dream to ride.
Good.
So 5 Minute Bark, Eddie Fiola, thank you for coming on. And listeners, thank you for listening. And that's it.
Have fun, ride.
You're watching the 5 Minute Bark podcast on YouTube. If you like this episode, you just may like many more. Subscribe today by clicking the red subscribe button in the top right-hand corner.